to TheReadingRoom.com Great Reads. I'm pretty sure that it would be very hard to find somebody who have not heard of the title 50 Shades of Grey. Some of you have read it, some of you did not, some of it loved it, some of it did not, but even people who did not read it keep asking themselves as to what made this book connect with so many people around the world. Well, erotica has never been hotter than before, and I have a great treat for you today, being able to introduce you to two fantastic writers that write about erotic subjects in a very different way. I am here privileged to say hello to Abbi Glines, who came to visit us from the United States. She's a very well-known author there and somebody who is a household name on some major bestseller lists, New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal. She's an author of a number of series, including the Vincenzi, am I pronouncing this correctly? Vincent Boys, the Breeze, the Sea Breeze series, and the Existence trilogy. And she has a number of titles that she's also self-published. She is also being recognized as one of the pioneers of the new genre called the new adult. And my second guest today is Kate Belle, who is the Australian writer of contemporary women's fiction with some strong erotic themes. And I believe you've published now a couple of novellas in the Masters of Love series. Yep. And a brand new novel called The Yearning that has been getting some fantastic reviews on the site. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we speak or ask you some questions about you as writers, we would like to hear a little bit about you as readers. So I just wanted to ask both of you if you could quickly or just limit yourself to a couple of your favorite titles. And I also wanted to ask you if you could tell us if you could be one fictional character, who would that be and why? Abbi.
Starting with me. See, my all-time favorite book is Beautiful Disaster by Jamie McGuire. It's been that for the past 2 years. I've told everyone that's asked me that's my favorite book. Several other books on the list would be Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, Fall Guy by Liz Reinhart, Easy by Tamara Weber. These are all new adult authors, obviously. That seems to be what I read right now. Those are some of my favorites that I can think of off the top of my head. As for the fictional character, which I wish I could be, would be Abbi. Obviously, it's got my name. That's not why. If you've read Beautiful Disaster by Jamie McGuire, Travis Maddox is my ultimate book boyfriend, and I would like to be his Abbi. Yes, definitely. Sorry, honey. Yeah, he's the ultimate guy for me in fiction. So.
Okay, Kate?
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm what I call a book slut. So I don't have a favourite title because it's whatever I've most recently read. And my favourite books are the surprises that come through other people. When they shove a book in my hand and say, you have to read this, that becomes my favourite. I think the most recent one was The White Tiger, and I can't remember the author's name, he's Indian.
Abbi.
That was just a wonderful read. But I also love Nikki Gemmell, and I absolutely love Topsha Lerner's erotic short stories. I've always got one of those on hand to read. A favourite fictional character, my daughter is 8, so I read a lot of kids' books. My favourite fictional character has to be Peter Pan. I would want to be Peter Pan if I could be anybody. I could fly, I could fight pirates, I could play with Indians. It would be great. That's my favourite.
Now, Abbi, you have been often referred to as somebody who was one of the inventors or pioneers of this new adult genre. Could you tell us a little bit how you define it? What are the common themes that you find in that genre?
The new adult genre is often thought just because it has sex in it and it's young people. That's not what it is. After you finish high school and you move on, you're still not quite an adult, but you are. You're facing adult issues. life is still new. It's the beginning of your life. I kind of think of Friends, used to come on TV. It was a big show, obviously. They were new to life. They hadn't got married yet. They didn't have babies, and they had to have jobs, but it wasn't as many bills. It wasn't as many big issues. They were finding themselves. They were figuring out what kind of adult they wanted to be. I feel like that's what New Adult is about. There is sex in it, yes, most of them, not all of them. There are several really good New Adult novels without sex. However, there's sex in it because that's part of their life too. They're finding out things that they didn't in high school. That's not, the high school back of the truck kind of thing anymore, or, making out under the bleachers. We've moved on from that. So it's different. It's a different scenario, and it appeals to not just the reader that's that age. I found that it's appealing to older people my age as well, because we like to remember that time in our life when the issues were different, and it was easier, even though we didn't think it was easy at the time, and it was exciting and new. So that's what I feel like the range is for New Adult.
Yeah, this actually leads me very well to the second thing I was going to ask you. So most of the characters in your novels are sort of between 17 and 20. And a lot of them, well, to me, the parts that I've read felt really very real. How do you stay so close to that particular age group? And why did you choose that age group?
Well, with my New Adult novels, they're actually 19 to 24. Now, I do have some books that are still considered young adult, and they are 17, 18, that age. I don't know why. I think that I liked that time in life. I mean, I live my life now, but that time in life was fun and exciting. And I'm not gonna lie, I have a brother-in-law who's 21, and he's obviously just turned 21. So I've gone to him a lot, and I've said, okay, I'm old, so help me here. What would this be realistic? Would you say this? Would you think this? I'm not gonna go into detail some of the questions I've asked him because he's turned red. But I've asked him and friends of his and girls that he's dating at the time. I'll say, okay, does this feel real to you? Would this sound real? Or am I handling the situation wrong? So I think that's one way that's helped me keep things young, but I like that age group. I like the excitement and the newness of it. And I just tend to I've tried to write adult novels and it doesn't work. They end up New Adult novels. They start getting younger and younger, and I can't seem to do it.
In the recent developments, because of that new genre, there have been a lot of talks about young adult, new adult, adult, and where are the boundaries between how far you go in each of these novels. Do you feel yourself that there are any really sort of limits where you would kind of say to yourself, no, that's off limits to my readers? And if so, where and why?
I think that if it's something I feel like they're not ready for, although my readers are typically 25 to 35, I've drawn the line at the darker side of sex. I don't go there. The sex is very explicit, but it is also very realistic to that age group. I don't get into the sexual situations that are darker that more adults have dipped into, because I feel like that really is not something they can relate to quite yet in their life. If, they might not understand it as well. It's not something that I feel like I can write realistically. That's really the only lines I draw. I don't draw any other lines. Everything else is, as long as it's something they can relate to and it's something that they've dealt with in their life, I write it.
Now, Kate, you have been writing predominantly or exclusively for the adult market, and you are not novice to it. So I think you would be a great person to really ask to draw a line for us between erotica and pornography. What's the big difference?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame that people lump it all into one category, because the range and scope is as broad as the characters that are covered by this kind of fiction. So pornography, it's very easy to identify pornography. It's very utilitarian. It's very slot A, tab B. It's very physical. There's not a lot of emotional content. It's actually written to a certain length, in a certain style, for a particular purpose. And it doesn't actually have a purpose within the character's story or the character development. Whereas if you go to erotic romance is actually romance just with the sex included, and the sexual aspect of the relationship is just as important as the romantic relationship overall. So it's part of that romantic development. and it's there to help the reader understand where the characters are within the relationship, and it's always tied with their emotional journey. Erotic cut at the other end tends to be more literary and covers more taboo topics and darker sexual kind of fantasy. So it explores some of the more unconscious and darker sides of human sexuality and can be much more challenging and much more confronting. It can still be arousing in the way that it's written, because it's often very poetic and beautiful, but it serves a completely different function. So they're very, there's blurring between the lines, but they are distinct in terms of the styles and the way that they're written. Yeah.
Now, The Yearning is definitely, I would define it as an adult novel, but you play with this whole teenage adult scenario, but you play with it in an interesting way because it's not so clear, I guess, where the line sometimes between the student teachers and the line between predator and victim. Do you think that this kind of writing would have even been possible a few decades ago? And what makes it possible now?
Okay. To be honest, I think the writing's always been possible. You only have to look at novels like Lolita, although that was banned. But this kind of writing has been around for a long time. I guess the confronting issue for a lot of people is that The Yearning examines the teacher-student relationship, but I do it in a context of trying to understand both sides of the story. So it's not as simple as an adult exploiting a young person. And I think with some of these relationships and the way they evolve, it's a much more complex dynamic, and there is a power struggle going on in terms of the sexual playing field between the two characters and also the emotional playing field. So even though the adult is always seen to have the ultimate power, and at the end of the day they are the one, Solomon is the one that draws the line or not, he is still vulnerable to the teenage girl, and she's aware that her sexuality has some power over him, and she uses that to lure him. And I think that this is something that we don't often talk about in these kind of scenarios, and I think it's still something that we should be talking about, because those young people, we live in a very sexualised culture, and those young people know that sexuality has a currency. So I think it's an important thing to help them understand what sexual currency actually is and how they can use it in a way that doesn't put them at risk.
Yeah. In some very obvious way, sex is definitely a gender-specific experience. Do you think that men can write about it from women's perspective convincingly, and vice versa?
To be honest, I haven't come across a male writer who can write with the same kind of pathos that women can. It's not to say that I don't think it's possible. I think that gender experience of sexuality is very limited by our cultural values and beliefs, and it's very limited by what we know about ourselves sexually. I think there are probably men out there who have gone beyond what is commonly known about their sexuality and understand it more broadly, that probably could write about women's erotic experience and do it convincingly. I just think that that is a rare thing for both men and women, that our understanding of the range of sexual experience is quite limited. So, but I haven't seen any boys writing good sex yet. It's all pretty punchy when they get into it.
In the recent months, we have seen a pretty massive resurgence of erotica and erotic themes that have now infiltrated the young adult and the new adult fiction. it has become sort of a mainstream genre, and a lot of the people that used to be closet readers now are talking out and open about this subject and reading about it and writing about it. But at the same time, I mean, it seems like it's all very open and liberating, but at the same time, we still seem to hold sort of very firmly to certain ideas of what is permissible or allowable to a man and not to a woman. Do you think that that can change at all, and what would it take to change it? Abby.
You go first.
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, you go first. I'm not sure. I need to think a moment.
I think that we are in the middle of a zeitgeist. How do you say that? Zeitgeist. I think we're in the middle of a quite a big cultural shift in terms of the way we see sex. And I think it's good that it's being written about and it's become more popular as part of of our literary culture, because it's just sex. It's not scary or big or unusual, or there's nothing weird about it.
Yeah.
So it's good that it's actually starting to be written about. It's not being pushed away as if it's dark and it should be something we should be ashamed of. I think that that's a good thing. And I think part of what that is affecting is the way we think about sex and those gender roles, in terms of, women have always been punished for being sexually powerful. And they've been judged for being sexually powerful, whereas men, it's kind of always been, traditionally, they've been applauded for being sexually powerful. And I think what these new genres and this passion that readers have got for this erotic fiction is actually women carving out a new sense of themselves as a sexual being. And I think it's the beginning of a cultural shift in terms of how we see female sexuality, and I think it's a great thing. I think we really need it.
And I think that, Abby, you come here as a really interesting perspective, because you are kind of almost like one of the first to introduce that. You are at that level when it may be the first time when they are reading something like this seriously.
Yes, that is a lot of pressure with that. I don't know, a lot of them have read adult romances, but as we discussed, the differences in adult romance is necessarily not the same anymore. The sex rarely fades to black anymore. You normally get the details, and people are expecting it. And I think that it was, I've always thought that it was unfair, because I felt like women had to be careful and not talk about it and keep their mouths shut. And it wasn't something, you admitted to or reading it. And it was never a fair thing, whereas men could do and watch and say as they please, and no one would think anything of it. And it was an unfair balance. And I do think it's changing. I think that men are happy that it's changing. I know that I've had several men actually send me emails thanking me that their wives have read my books and that they are very glad that their wives read my books, and it has helped them at home. So I think that I think that the more it's accepted and the more women embrace it and they're not ashamed of it and they are talking about it in their book clubs and in the car line at school, which has often happened, that it helps. I mean, there's no reason why we should. Men would get bored, and how many times have we seen the housewife accused of being boring in that area, and men would get bored? Well, we've got a lot of things to work with now. Good fictional thoughts to help us through. So anyway.
Now, before I let you go, I have one more question for you, since you're both such stars within your genre. There's still obviously a little bit of a stigma around the whole genre of erotica, and I wonder if I was going to ask you to suggest one title, that if you could make people read one title that would make them understand what this genre is really about, what would you suggest, Abby?
Well, mine would be, I've never read just erotica, like we discussed, but I've actually never read that Have Your Book, and I'm going to have that one. They gave me a copy. I'm going to be reading it. I've read erotic romance, because I tend to evolve. I want everything to have romance in it. That seems to be my thing. So I have read erotic romance, and Backstage Pass by Olivia Cunning is actually one of the first erotic romances I read, and I wanted to give it a try because a lot of people that I'm friends with had read it and went on and on about it, and I realized that it is not porn. as many people had accused that kind of writing of being. It's not at all. It's good stories, and yes, that part is really fun to read about, and it's really good and creative and descriptive, but that's not all the story's about. There's a story there, just like there is with any other book. And there's, I think that everyone should give it a try. I think that's a really good book for someone to try if they're going to start with erotic romance.
Great. Kate?
I actually have 2 books in my mind. One is My 100 Lovers, or My 100 Lovers by Susan Johnson. Only because it's not erotica per se, but it's about living an erotic life. And, she starts from babyhood all the way through to being a woman in her 50s. And there is the erotic richness of her lived experience in that book is just so good. It's broad, and the scope of it is so wide. It goes from grass and sunshine to lovers and different kinds of lovers and different ways of making love. And I love that book. It was just such a great reflection on the eroticism of living life and being engaged with life. The other one, which is a bit more extreme, it's probably a bit closer to erotica, is called Landscape with Animals. And it's by an anonymous writer, but I think people kind of worked out who wrote that one. It's very, very erotic, but it has that relationship and emotional journey entwined with it, and the language that she uses to explain these different erotic experiences is just beautiful. It's like poetry. I felt it was like poetry. It can be quite confronting sometimes, but I really enjoyed that in terms of really going into an erotic experience and understanding what that erotic experience is about from an emotional point of view. So yeah, those 2.
Thank you very much for this fantastic conversation, and I hope that for a lot of the readers it will be an eye-opening experience as to what a great treasures you can find in this new adult erotica in many different shades of it. So go ahead and find our pages for Abbi Glines and for Kate Belle, and check out their books on our site. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.